Hello everyone, welcome to our immigration channel page. If you're applying for a marriage-based green card, this video is a must-watch. My name is Leyla Moallemzadeh and I'm here with Arif Gozel. We are both immigration attorneys and we are here to talk about how the immigration marriage-based cases are having a big shift with the way the interviews and the review of the files are being conducted. By the way, we have a comprehensive article about how these interviews and how USCIS is handling marriage-based cases on our website. We have also included a link in the description below. Hi Arif.
Hi Leyla.
How are you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well as well, and I'm here because I think this is a very important topic for our clients to understand. There's a big shift in the way marriage-based cases are being reviewed. So can you give us a little background about your experience these days?
Yes, definitely. So in the past 4 years under the Biden administration, these cases were much easier to get approved, and USCIS most of the time did not conduct interviews and they just adjudicated the petitions applications based on papers and evidence. But now we are seeing interviews as a standard procedure, and also we do see Stokes interview. Do you want to get started with that?
Yes. So based on what I've heard, that now some field offices are conducting just Stokes interviews. This was something that has happened in the past, but only in limited cases. Only if USCIS didn't believe this was a real marriage based on the paperwork that was submitted. Now there's been a shift in policy, and in some field offices they're doing this as a standard process. Do you want to talk about what a Stokes interview is?
Yes, so in the past USCIS would think that there is some red flags about the bona fides of the marriage, then they would interview spouses separately and then ask the same questions to both of them and try to understand whether they give the same answers and whether the marriage is genuine or not. It was an exceptional tool that was used by officers, but now USCIS thinks that every case can be fraudulent. So as you mentioned, some of the offices make it a standard procedure to conduct those Stokes interviews.
So I'll talk a little about my experience with Stokes interviews. I have not had one recently, but in the past when I've had to go for a Stokes interview, usually they would notify us in advance that this is going to be a Stokes interview. I believe that has changed. I believe that now you don't know it's going to be a Stokes interview, and you can walk into the office. Based on what I saw at the Newark office recently, when I was there for a client's interview, I saw that once the check-in happened, the officers would come and they would tell the petitioner, you stay out here, and they would take in the beneficiary, or sometimes they would say the beneficiaries should stay outside and they would take in the petitioner. So it was a little surprising for me that there was no advance knowledge that this is going to be a Stokes interview. I think that's a shift that I've seen. And generally what happens, as you said, is that they separate the spouses and they start asking questions, and then they call in the other spouse and ask the same questions to make sure the answers match. A lot of the times what I experienced was that sometimes they did not remember the answers to some questions, because some questions could be like, what day do they pick up your garbage at your apartment? And a lot of people don't know that. And instead of saying, we live in an apartment and I don't know what day they pick up the garbage, the client would think that they would just have to give some answer. And then the spouse would come in, same thing. They would think that I just have to answer this question, and those kind of questions don't match. So what is your suggestion about that?
So I think the spouses have at the liberty of saying that they don't know the answer, right? So the practical recommendation is not to guess, but if you don't remember or if you don't know the answer, just say so.
Correct. I agree with you. I always advise my clients that they should not guess anything. If they don't know the answer, say that they don't know the answer. Another thing that I advise them is sometimes they don't understand the question and they just guess an answer. I always tell them, if you don't understand the question, just make sure to clarify with the officer. It's perfectly fine to tell the officer, can you please repeat that? Or I didn't understand the question. Can you clarify your question? The intention is to make sure that you're not just guessing and you're giving them the right and accurate response. And maybe it's like, I don't know the answer.
Definitely. So most officers can appreciate that you are under stress in that interview, and it is completely normal that you might not remember what you ate last night.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes, correct. I've seen those kind of questions. Some questions that I've seen them ask is, did you drive together to the interview? So that's a question you can easily answer, yes or no. And then the follow-up question is, who was the driver? Did you stop anywhere on your way to the interview? Those types of questions I've heard of. What about about you? What are your experiences?
Yeah, definitely. So they can ask you when they first met. So you might not remember the exact date, but you can say that, oh, it was a cold winter day, right? So you don't have to be very specific saying that it was December 19, 2025 or something. So you can feel comfortable saying that, oh, I remember these facts, but I don't exactly recall the specifics.
Correct. Yes. I think that's about it when it comes to Stokes interview and how they should prepare for it. I don't think there's really any way to properly prepare, because if you live together, they might ask you like, what side of the bed do you sleep? You should know that. I've even heard, how many TVs do you have in your house? What's the brand of your TV that's in the living room? So some people might know and some people might not even care and not know.
Definitely. So they sometimes ask how many bathrooms in the house or how many bathtubs or a shower. I don't think that spouses should try to memorize every questions can possibly be asked.
Correct.
But they should definitely take a look at the common questions online.
Correct.
But you don't have to memorize them. And what do you think the role of the attorney during the interview and before the interview?
I mean, an attorney can sit with a client and prepare them and let them know what types of questions they can expect. Of course, you can never know 100% what questions might be asked, but that's an exercise because, as I said, even if you live in the same household, you might not remember the brand of a TV, and an attorney can help you with those types of questions and give you some sort of guidance of what kind of questions may come your way, and you have that expectation. In addition, at the interview, even though an attorney cannot answer, but an attorney can make sure that the officer is in line and is not asking questions they should not be asking or not intimidating the client.
Yeah, and an attorney can request a brief break if it is needed, and if the officer is out of the line or asking inappropriate questions, an attorney can also request for supervisor.
Yes, correct.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So even though the attorney, as you mentioned, cannot give answers on behalf of their clients, they can definitely help, and their presence in the room can help with the questioning and the manner of questioning.
Correct. And the behavior of the officer.
Okay.
I have heard in the past when an attorney was not present, they try to pressure the petitioner that this isn't a real marriage. And sometimes they will say, listen, we already know this isn't a real marriage. And if you sign right now that this isn't a real marriage, there will be no action against you. So even if it's a real marriage, sometimes the petitioner will get scared and they don't know what's going to happen next. So it's important to have an attorney in the room.
Definitely. Leyla, can you talk about the evidence part? Like what type of evidence should we have? And regarding the address proof, what do you recommend?
So I believe that a fully complete prepared package still makes a difference. Even in today's immigration climate, I feel like if you give them the proper evidence and the officer already has some idea that this is a real marriage, it'll make an impact even in those field offices that they require a Stokes interview. So the main thing is for the officer to realize that this is a real marriage. And one way that they, unfortunately, even today, realize it's a real marriage or decide it's a real marriage is that if they see there's financial commingling, that makes a big difference. So if somebody has 401k and the other spouse is 100% beneficiary of their 401k, that's a really good piece of evidence you can submit. Same goes with if there's bank account and there's a joint bank account, even though the reality of these days is that a lot of people don't have joint bank accounts anymore. If you still have a joint bank account, you can submit it. If you don't, then you rely on other evidence, the non-traditional evidence, such as the 401k. I had a case where we used adoption papers for a dog that had both spouses' names on the adoption papers. These days, you can even use your Venmo account to show that you were basically dividing the expenses and paying the other spouse. All of that is evidence that you can use. I would still use evidence to show that they live at the same household if that is the case. So joint bank account will have the same address, driver's license will have the same address, tax returns with the same address, any other like pay stubs with the same address, utility bills, a lease, mortgage with the same address, those will show that you live in the same address.
So spouses should have a list of addresses, and then once they move in, they should definitely update the addresses everywhere.
Correct.
With DMV, with bank, with the employer,
Correct.
and all of their insurances and utility bills, they should all need to be updated.
Correct. Yes. That's a very
And as
good
you
piece of
mentioned, like the
information.
officers first look at the address on the driver's license. distance.
Correct.
So definitely update that address as soon as possible. How about like tax documents? Is there an important factor regarding filing married but separately, or do we need to take a look at other factors as well?
So the best advice, the best practice is if you're married, file jointly. That's the best way to do it. But sometimes that's not the practical way to do it. In some cases, a CPA might advise you to file married filing separately. If that's the case, even though that's not the practice USCIS prefers, but if there's something in your life that requires that, you should have a CPA write a letter and explain why you were advised based on a CPA's advice to file married filing separately. And if all your other documents show that this is a real marriage and you just have a tax return that shows you're filing separately, generally it should not cause an issue.
Okay. How about the head of household thing? Like, is it important for marriage-based applications?
That's a very, very important note, because when you're filing head of household, you have to basically say that you're filing as because you're living separately. So for a marriage-based case, it's important that you show that you're not living separately. So there are instances where that can be justified. As I was telling you before, there is a case where I have two medical students who are doing residency in two separate states. It's not because they want to live separately, but because of their career, they have no choice but to live separately. So in that case, that can be justified. So depending on whether that could actually be justified or not, you should really pay attention to that.
Okay, so just to get some tax benefits, they should not be putting head of household.
Correct.
For sure.
100%. So it's different if you're filing head of household and getting a tax benefit and you don't have an immigration process. And it's different if you have an immigration process where every document is going to be looked at.
Thank you. How about support letters? Like, is it helpful to get support letters from friends or close relatives? What do you think about those?
To be honest, if I have proper evidence and sufficient evidence, I usually don't add affidavits. Only if I feel like we don't have enough evidence to show that this is a bona fide marriage, I would also ask the clients to provide affidavits. It's important to know that when you're submitting affidavits, you want to make sure if you're submitting 3 affidavits, it doesn't look exactly the same, like the same person wrote it and just changed the person's name. It's also important that the person who's the affiant, who's writing the affidavit, that they talk about their own personal experience and how they have knowledge of your relationship. And I usually add, so if somebody says, I know this is a real marriage because I attended their wedding, I usually also add a picture of them at the wedding with a copy of their driver's license to prove that this is the person who was actually writing the affidavit. This is their driver's license. This is a copy of their signature, and this is their picture at the wedding. So this kind of gives it more value and more weight, because USCIS will know that somebody didn't just make this up. There's evidence, and that person was ready to even provide a copy of their driver's license. So I think that gives it more weight. Important to know that you should always talk about your personal experience, how you know, where you got the knowledge from.
Definitely. Providing the ID is important. So there are many differences from letter to letter, I guess. So
Yes.
if you provide more collaborating evidence, that letter can be much more meaningful.
Correct.
Generally, I consider these letters the least strong evidence,
Yes.
because like anyone can get evidence, but sometimes relationship is very new and there are not much financial evidence or not much photographs or travel history, and then these letters can be much more important in that regard.
Correct. Yes. Only, as I said, only if the person doesn't have sufficient evidence, I would put in affidavits, but I would never put in an affidavit without having those supporting documents, because I don't think they carry that much weight.
Definitely. I think the applicants should also consider getting letters from credible people and who have not had problematic immigration history, because we've seen many RFEs and NOIDs based on the address history or the writer's own immigration history, and officers can now challenge your application because of your friends or relatives' problematic history.
It's very important to make sure that the person giving you the affidavit is a credible person, and you want to make sure that when USCIS looks into their background, they don't find anything that can also be a negative factor for you, which can cause maybe a site visit from USCIS. Do you want to expand upon that?
We now know that fraud detection unit is much more active right now, and they can visit your house, they can talk to your neighbors, your employers, and they can ask about the validity of your marriage to them. Did you have any experience regarding site visits?
For a marriage-based case, I really have not had until now a site visit. In H-1 H-1B cases, we've had site visits, but not for marriage-based cases.
Okay.
I think this is something that's also relatively new. Am I correct?
Yes, so it is much more common right now. I just received an email from a client who had an affirmative asylum application pending and got married to a US citizen, and they just emailed me saying that all of a sudden USCIS officers came to their home and then questioned the validity of their marriage. And maybe they initially applied for asylum, triggered that, but it can happen. And also we know that USCIS now can conduct neighborhood interviews and neighborhood checks for even naturalization applications.
Yes.
So this is important. And I had many cases, I've seen many NOID, notice of intent to denies, where USCIS conducted an interview with the landlord and asked about the validity of the signature on the lease agreement, and the landlord said that I don't remember signing this document or lease agreement. Then I witnessed a client's naturalization application being denied just because of that reason.
I think the takeaway from this is that the documents you provide to USCIS, you should make sure that those documents are true and accurate documents, so that these days, as you just said, you can have them go and visit your landlord. You want to make sure that the lease, as you said, was really signed by the landlord. So it really is in the client's interest to make sure that the documents that they are providing are not fraudulent documents, because it's just going to complicate everything. And the reality is, when you're applying for a green card through marriage, you're getting a conditional green card for 2 years, and you're going to have to do this again. So that's something to think about.
And I also saw some problematic NOIDs from potential clients. I did not represent them in their initial filings, but USCIS was able to see, for example, all overseas travels, and they mentioned in the NOID that you traveled abroad like 5 times, and in every your international travels there was somebody else sitting next to you, and it was not your spouse. So, and even like they have the records of you taking cruise travels with someone else, and then it might be very hard for you to overcome those NOIDs. So receiving an RFE or notice of intent to deny, is it the end of the world, or what's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that if it's a real marriage, it doesn't matter if you do a Stokes interview or if you do have an FDNS visit or you receive a NOID. If it's a real marriage, in my opinion, it's overcomable.
Definitely. So please do not file any fraudulent applications. Otherwise, it is generally easier to prove that your marriage is genuine, as long as it is genuine.
Correct. Thank you for watching the video. If you're going through a marriage-based green card process, our firm is here to help you. You can contact us through the contact information on the screen.